Got late. Chapter 15. Sawyer was dubious. Do you really expect people not to believe that an 8.5-month pregnant woman learns her husband had an affair and is casual about it, accommodating, makes peace with it? Well, yeah. You don't know. No one knows our relationship but us. That's at peace with it, not happy about it. Why did you tell her? It was the right thing. There's no other reason than that. And did you see her again after you told Lacey? Yes. You saw Amber again? I did. But didn't tell her? Sawyer asked. Didn't tell Lacey? Didn't tell Amber. No. Yeah, that was definitely not the right thing, because again, the people sitting at home have imagined that either you were in love with somebody else, therefore you decided to get rid of this entanglement, namely your wife and your child, or there was an angry confrontation. Neither of those was the case. It's that simple. What about Lacey's family? Sawyer asked. They're wonderful people. They're obviously upset with me about the romantic relationship with Amber. And they have little trust, as they expressed in the media to date. But I don't believe that they're still looking for Lacey. But I believe that they're still looking for Lacey, and I would like to work with them, and I think we'll be together on this effort, continuing to look for Lacey. The investigators were astounded by Scott's performance. From his claim that he immediately told the police about the affair to the ridiculous assertion that he told Lacey about Amber in early December. Yet it caused no real conflict between the two of them. Based on my knowledge of Lacey through other family members and individuals close to her, Grogan deadpanned in his report. I found this to be very unlikely. After the segment aired, Scott received a call from Amber, who confronted him about his claim on the show that he didn't love her. Scott explained that the media had cut out the part about him caring for her. Obviously, I care about you, he said. Amber brought up the polygraph exam he had promised to take. Scott told her that he intended to find an examiner near her home. Amber asked about the cost of the test. Scott said it was about $750. The police do it for free, she replied. Scott chuckled, then told her that his phone was cutting out. Next, Scott called a company called Expert Polygraph Services in Fresno and spoke to a polygrapher named Melvin King. Without identifying himself, he questioned King about the testing process. Primarily of interest to me currently is confidentiality, Scott told him. King assured him that everything was done in the strictest confidence. The polygrapher asked Scott why he was calling and what he was looking to accomplish. King assured him that everything was... Scott told him that it was personal. I'm gonna guess it has something to do with infidelity, King said. You're probably right on there, Scott replied. That day, Scott scheduled a meeting with his friend Brian Argan about selling his home. He also set up an interview with America's Most Wanted for later that evening. Next, he rang his parents. Jackie answered the phone. Scott told her that his lawyer, Kirk McAllister, and the Stanislaus County District Attorney had met for dinner earlier in the week. During the meal, he said the district attorney told McAllister that they were going to take up Scott on his offer. The DA said that if Scott tells us where the body is, we won't kill him, Scott added. Oh my God, Jackie Peterson replied. Yeah, the DA thinks I'm guilty too. Lee Peterson grabbed the receiver. What were you saying about the DA? He made me an offer. If I tell him where the body is, they won't put me to death. Oh, geesh, Lee responded. Scott told his father that Kirk had to relay on the offer because it was part of his legal responsibility. He said they're just struggling to find anything, that's why the police, call me and all this weird stuff they've done, like go down and meet with you. They call me and say, we're researching the Bay again, Scott. They're just trying to, crack people. He, Kirk McAllister, said that if they had the stuff that they say they have, I would have been hooked up right now. Kirk is pretty confident you're in good shape, though. Yeah, I mean, Kirk tells me I'm playing a deadly game here, but he's pretty confident. Kirk says you're playing a deadly game, Jackie Peterson repeated. Yep. Jeez, Jackie sighed. Kirk knows if the DA thinks they have enough to arrest me and they arrest me, there's no bail. It's a capital case, Scott said. Can you handle that? No bail? Jackie asked. God, I can't imagine being in prison, for who knows how long. But they have to do something credible. They have to have something credible to go on, Scott said. They won't and they can't, so I'm not really worried about it. I don't think they have anything they could have. I don't think they have anything they couldn't have, Lee Peterson said. No, there's nothing to have, Scott replied. No, that's what I mean, Lee said. Yeah, there's a hair and, skin in our cars. Scott chuckled. But if it's what they think they have, if that's what they think they have, I just wonder if Brocchini wouldn't plant something because he's so intent about solving this, Jackie Peterson chimed in. There's a possibility. There's no question, Scott said. What could he plant? He doesn't have anything, Lee Peterson asked. Oh, that's true, Scott agreed. Then Scott started talking about arrangements for his dog Mackenzie. To them, it sounded as though Scott intended to give the golden retriever away. When Jackie Peterson asked her son if he would miss Mackenzie, Scott choked up and said he was going to cry. In a prior conversation, Jackie Peterson indicated that she had deposited $50,000 into her son's bank account. The two had also talked about a trip to Mexico during the same call. Scott also told his mother that he had spoken to the producer of America's Most Wanted and had kicked the guy's ass around. He wished he'd dealt with this producer before he'd appeared on the show with Diane Sawyer. The two agreed that Scott would become more skilled doing TV interviews as he gained more experience on camera. Why would a grieving husband be so proud of kicking a producer's ass, the police wondered. For a grieving husband who should be showing appreciation for such a show that has a desire to keep his wife's face fresh and in the minds of millions of viewers, Investigator Jacobson noticed that this was indeed odd behavior. Jackie asked Scott if this guy from America's Most Wanted was going to help with the search. Scott said that he thought that the upcoming show would generate more tips on the case, and he said that the interview went well. People are more likely to call in tips to the show than to the police, Jackie said, adding that the host said he passes on the tips to the police. But Jackie said she was not sure she wanted to do that because you'll never hear them again. Scott told his mother that when the program aired in an earlier story about Lacey, Brocchini went to the studio to help take the calls himself. Huh. Then what did he do with them? Jackie asked. I don't know, Scott chuckled. He probably threw out the ones he didn't like. Yeah, that's what I feel about him. I wish he didn't have such an agenda. As their conversation continued, Jackie and Scott lashed out at Kim Peterson, referring to her as that little witch, and insinuating that she had discouraged the family from appearing on the show for a long time. As part of the investigation, Detective Brocchini had contacted the producers of America's Most Wanted. The producer told him that Scott had refused to answer a number of his questions and had wanted a chance to edit the interview. When the program aired later in the week, it was highly critical of Scott. The police also contacted District Attorney James Brazelton about the alleged offer to McAllister. Again, Scott was lying. There was never an offer. Instead, Brazelton recalled he'd run into Kirk McAllister in the parking lot of a courthouse several days prior, and in what he recalled as a 15-second conversation, he told McAllister his boy might be able to avoid having a needle in his arm if he tells us where the body is, so that the family can have a decent burial. McAllister replied, "What an attractive offer, but Scott doesn't know where she's at." Brazelton said that he'd never discussed the case with Scott's lawyer over dinner. In fact, that he had never formally met with McAllister to discuss the case. As the police noticed, Scott reacted to all this talk of the death penalty with a startling lack of emotion. The police were also puzzled by Lee Peterson's question to his son about whether his attorney thought he was in good shape. Apparently, there is more to know about Scott Peterson's involvement with Laci's disappearance, which would have prompted that question, Steve Jacobson wrote. Scott's response back that his attorney told him he's playing a deadly game here. I know that Kirk McAllister is very respected, seasoned criminal defense attorney. If in fact he made this comment to Scott, it indicates the seriousness of what he knows Scott's involvement to be and the consequences of playing such a game with law enforcement, Jacobson continued. In an effort to have his client stop playing the game or to show him the seriousness of the game, Kirk tells him it will have the ultimate consequence, that being death. As Jacobson noted, McAllister's remark elicited a series of self-serving statements from Scott. Not once do you hear Scott becoming upset or adamantly proclaiming his innocence, Jacobson wrote in the report. Instead, what is heard is his concern for being in prison for who knows how long. Scott even has to be reminded by his dad that the police would not plant any evidence because there is none. And Lee Peterson is right. The police would be unable to plant a body because one can't be found, and the chances are it never will be. Scott's comments about McKenzie indicated that Scott and his dog would be parting ways. There appeared to be a strong bond between Scott and his dog, one in which Scott says brings tears to his eyes as he watches him at the sliding glass door. Jacobson also noted, yet while grieving from the loss of his wife, he will now be separated from his dog for an undetermined amount of time, but will be afforded the opportunity later in life to get his dog back. I asked the question, where's Scott going? Based on everything they had heard so far, Jacobson noted, Scott may be contemplating two things, one being arrested and jailed for a long time, or two, fleeing the United States of America in an attempt to avoid prosecution. Scott has shown more genuine emotion from the separation of his dog than the loss of his wife, Laci Peterson. Faced with no other choice, the police decided to meet with the district attorney and to try to persuade him to file a case, or at the very least to stop Scott Peterson from leaving the country. Early on January 29th, the police recorded a call between Scott and his trade corp supervisor abroad. When his boss asked whether he would be attending a trade corp meeting in Mexico in the coming days, Scott said that he would be there. The call indicated that Scott might not be attempting to flee the jurisdiction, but was simply attending a conference south of the border. Still, detectives contacted Scott's boss and asked that he cancel any future trips for his employee. That same morning, the second half of Scott's taped Good Morning America interview was broadcast. This time, Scott was shown seated with the members of his immediate family. After viewing the program, Scott called his brother Mark. I think I may have, and it's entirely possible, I told them wrong about the girlfriend on air. He was acknowledging that he had lied and saying that he told the police about Amber. Scott believed that Sawyer picked up on this discrepancy because she announced after an interview that police sources were disputing this statement. So I screwed up, Scott said. Did you correct it today? Mark asked. No, I didn't. So you misanswered? Is that what you're saying? Must have. I did not tell the police about her that night. That day, with no attorney present, Scott sat down at his home for a series of additional media interviews. During the tapings, he addressed the $250,000 life insurance policy he said that he and Laci had taken out on each other when they purchased their home 2 years earlier. He reiterated that this was done long before Laci had disappeared. Real estate was also on Scott's mind. Later that day, he also spoke to his friend Brian Argan for a second time about the sale of his 523 Covina. Brian suggested that Scott speak with his attorney to find out if he and Lacey were both on the title. If so, he might have to get the court's approval before selling the house. By the day's end, Scott was on the phone with the Modesto Police Department complaining that members of the press were banging on his door. When the cops arrived, there was no one in the area. The police learned that a radio shock jock had been outside Scott's home earlier with the bullhorn screaming out an offer of $64,000 to Scott if he would take a polygraph. Other reporters had also been on his property, rattling his gate and attempting to speak to him. By the time the cops arrived, they had all dispersed. Detective Grogan was alerted to the situation, but his attempts to reach Scott by phone had failed. When Scott finally returned Grogan's call, the detective let it be known that he had seen his interview with Diane Sawyer. You'll probably see it, they caught me answering a question about that I told you about a girlfriend. It's not true. We both know that, Scott said. Okay, Grogan responded. Well, I understand there was a circus of media over there at the house, too, and bullhorns. Yeah, we had a couple of shock jocks here screaming with the bullhorn. All right, well, how are you doing it? I'm losing it. I miss her. Scott choked up. I guess so much to say that I haven't been able to function at all. Haven't called adult friends. I can't even talk, but I'm trying. But I'm just a mess without her. Well, there's a lot of stuff going on right now, the detective sighed. With the press and, it looks like most of that stuff is kind of turning the wrong direction on you. I know it. You know I did the press, and every question I answered today, I gave the website, the phone number. I didn't see any of it, but I'm guessing they didn't even put a damn thing in there. It's just unbelievable. They're not helping me find my wife. And I know the dogs you brought out, they're looking for her right now. Yeah, they need to be. I need them so bad to be looking for her. I need her back. You guys remember when Chris Watts said, "Bring her back. Bring my wife back." All right. I need them so bad to be looking for her. I need her back. Tell me there's some leads. Tell me something's there to look for. Well, I'm not telling you, and there's anything that's pointing in your direction right now. That is somewhere. Well, I'm not telling you that there's anything that's pointing any direction right now. That is somewhere other than you. No? I mean, you and I both know what happened to Lacey. Do you know what happened to her? We both do. Craig, I need to know what happened to her. Are you telling me you know what happened to her? Scott, let's be serious with one another. Well, I know where we're looking for her, and I think we're probably going to find her over in the bay. Oh? It's a matter of time. Craig, I had nothing to do with Lacey's disappearance. Hey, yeah, I'm going to go. Scott, what I'm offering you is an opportunity here to end it all with all of this nonsense. I'm going to find her, Craig. Why don't you come back here and sit with me and tell me what happened? I'm not involved in my wife's disappearance. We're going to find her, and I need your help doing that, and I just hope the department's following leads. I want to find her. That's all there is to it. Yeah, I'm going to go now. Bye. As January came to a close, the police were forging ahead with a renewed focus on Scott Peterson. By now, they had received 5,800 tips on the case. Scott, meanwhile, had sold Lacey's Land Rover to Roberts Auto World for $7,500 and purchased a 2002 white Dodge truck. Two women also came forward, claiming affairs with Scott Peterson while he was married. Police found both Janet Eyes and Katie Henson claims to be credible. In addition, a third woman calling from the Las Vegas area was also claiming to have an affair with Peterson. While researching this book, I have heard references to other women, including a few members of the Mile High Club, who became intimately acquainted with Scott while flying overseas, but to date the reports have never been confirmed. As Brocchini sought some information on the alleged affairs, Rogan sat down with Sharon and Amy Rocha to look through Lacey's jewelry once again. The detectives wanted to learn if either woman noticed any items absent from the collection. Both agreed that only the one piece that appeared to be missing was a pair of 1-carat diamond stud earrings that Lacey typically wore. Their claim was in stark contrast to Scott's statement that his wife had been wearing several valuable pieces when he saw her on Christmas Eve. Interestingly, Ann Bird told me that she had been to the Harvey Claire's auction gallery in Oakland when a pair of 1-carat screw-back earrings, eerily similar to the ones Lacey had been wearing, was being offered for sale. Screwback earrings are not very common these days, so Annie asked where the seller had obtained them. A reliable source, she was told. Would you speak to the police, she asked, suspicious that the earrings might have been Lacey's. Yes, she was told. Anne grabbed a brochure and then called Jackie to tell her about the earrings. Jackie contacted Sharon Rocha. As far as Anne knew, nothing ever came of the tip, and she learned later that the police never checked out the lead. Now that Scott's infidelity was widely known, Now that Scott's infidelity was widely known and allegiances within Scott's circles were being tested, Bueller set about re-interviewing Lacey's friends in search of new insights. In late January, he met again with Renee Tomlinson, Stacey Boyers, Lori Ellsworth, and Kim McNally. McNally. She might be Scottish. The women all recalled being troubled by Scott's healthy appetite on Christmas Day. They felt it strange that Scott began eating almost immediately upon returning from the police headquarters that day. They were also troubled by his directive that no photographs of him had been used at the volunteer center, released to the media, or used in any fashion during the investigation. He also prohibited any wedding pictures or video from being distributed and did not want any photos of him involved in the search. Scott was often the first to arrive at the volunteer center in the morning, but he refused to permit the media to the center allowed to enter until 9:30 a.m. He made it a habit to leave by 9:20. One day, when a reporter came in early, Scott demanded that he leave. As the day progressed, friends reported that Scott remained non-emotional, organized, and very much in control. He was able to recall different ideas and suggestions that were made, as well as assignments that were handed out at the volunteer center. When one of the women asked Scott to supply photos of Lacey's jewelry so that volunteers can show them to pawn shop owners around town, Scott simply ignored her repeated request. Such controlled behavior clashed with Scott's claim that he was distraught over Lacey's disappearance and that he was losing paperwork and unable to supply things to the police. During the long meeting at headquarters, all four women reported that until recently they had viewed Scott as a good, attentive husband. They based their impressions on his willingness to endure some of the small irritations that Lacey had thrust upon him. The consensus was that Lacey was an incessant talker and that her ceaseless chatter sometimes irritated those around her. The woman recalled that once at a party, Scott had told a friend that Lacey's talking was so constant that he sought refuge in the bathroom, only to have Lacey follow him to the door and just keep chatting. The woman agreed that Lacey's constant jabbering didn't dull their affections for her, but they admired Scott for his patience. Over the past few months, though, the women's opinions of Scott had changed. Conduct they once dismissed as isolated incidents of rude behavior had now taken on a new significance. One friend recalled that Scott grabbed her buttock at a party in November of 2000. At the time, she had talked it up to an accidental brush, but now she believed it may have been intentional. Scott also disturbed another one of Lacey's friends when he told her that he didn't like her young nephew. Embarrassed by Scott's rude comment, Lacey apologized, telling her friend that Scott was not accustomed to being around children. Scott reportedly told his wife that he saw nothing wrong with his comment. After all, the boy wasn't her friend's child. Besides, he claimed he had nothing against children in general. He just couldn't stand this particular tot. And there was more. Renee remembered that a previous summer when Scott was out of town, she was at the house when he called to speak with Lacey. Renee overheard Lacey asking him about the status of their health insurance, since she was in the first stages of her pregnancy. When Lacey learned that the insurance wasn't active, she accused Scott of not caring about her and the baby. For weeks after the phone confrontation, Lacey had expressed frustration over her husband's failure to take care of the insurance issue. It was the only time that Renee recalled her being truly upset with her husband. The woman also agreed, however, that Lacey regularly ordered her husband around in front of her friends, telling him to take out the garbage, change a CD on the stereo, and perform other jobs around the house. At the time, the women all thought it was so cool that Lacey was able to give Scott directions without him getting angry. Now they wondered what resentment may have been building up within Scott. Renee also reported that Lacey complained that Scott's recent traveling, as well as his upcoming trip to Europe in late January. At a party the two of them attended on December 7, 2002, Lacey had been upset over the prospect of Scott traveling to Brussels so close to the baby's due date. She said she had even asked her husband to cancel the trip. On another mid-December visit, Lacey had complained again about Scott's increasingly busy work schedule. She explained to Renee that she was looking forward to a trip to Carmel she and Scott had planned for later in the month. Even though Scott's family would be there, Lacey was eager for the time to spend with her husband. She hoped he would stay home more once the baby had arrived. Another friend, Heather Richardson, told Renee that she believed Scott never wanted children. Lacey had mentioned having a three-way sonogram performed on the baby to appease Scott's concern about possible birth defects, and told Heather that abortion would likely be an option if there were any detected. Lacey's friends believed that Scott was pressuring her to have the test performed, and that the possibility of an abortion was his idea and not hers. During the conversation, the women recalled that on December 25th, while everyone was congregated at police headquarters for a press conference, Scott told friends and family that he would not be taking a polygraph. He said that he had spoken with his father, who instructed him to speak to an attorney. Lee also advised him that he was too emotionally distraught to do well on the test. After Scott's pronouncement, Renee walked over to give him a hug. "Lacey loved you so much," she told him. "You make me feel bad," Scott responded, a strange reaction which Renee now took as a sign that he had something to do with her friend's disappearance. Another friend, Kim McNelly, recalled that Lacey had learned she was pregnant soon after Renee's baby shower. However, when she approached Scott excitedly about her home pregnancy test, he brushed her off, saying that he was hungover from the party the night before. Kim also recalled Scott asking her then boyfriend whether a father could expect to have sex again after a child is born. The boyfriend said that it wouldn't be the same. Scott seems concerned about how the arrival of the baby would change his sex life in terms of the frequency and the quality. At one point, Kim asked Lacey if she and her husband were still having sex. Lacey told her no, but confided that she still pleasured her husband. As the interview drew to a close, Bueller asked the women if they'd ever seen Lacey react under stress. They recalled Lacey's relationship with her longtime boyfriend, Kent Gain. They knew the relationship had an element of domestic violence to it, they said. because Lacey spoke freely about the situation. Stacy Boyer told Bueller that when she found out that her own boyfriend, Brian Argan, was cheating on her, both Scott and Lacey were very supportive throughout their breakup. From things Lacey told her, Stacy believed that Lacey wouldn't have tolerated Scott cheating on her. In the end, Lacey's friends agreed that she would have told at least one of them if Scott had confessed to his relationship with Amber Fry, even though she hadn't done so with Janet Ives. In the days that followed, Bueller met with two female employees of the real estate firm where Scott's friend Brian Argan was employed. The women told the police that when they mentioned Scott, Argan made it clear that he was standing by his friend. According to the employees, Argan had said something to the effect that even if he did it, he's still my friend. For Grogan, a second interview with Lacey's aunt, Robin Marie Rocha, reinforced Scott's discomfort around children. She recalled an incident at a birthday party with Scott and Lacey in September 2001. At one point, she needed to put her infant daughter down so that she could use the restroom. Marie approached Scott and asked if he would hold the child just for a moment. As she recalled, he leaned back in his chair, held his hands up in the air, and said no. She came away from the incident convinced that Scott never wanted a child. Marie also told the detective that her niece would be headstrong at times. Lacey often talked about babies, and if Lacey wanted to have a baby, she would have a baby whether Scott wanted one or not, she said. Marie described Lacey as a loving and kind person, but also stubborn and accustomed to getting her way. Yet she was totally in love with Scott and never said a derogatory word about her husband. On January 30th, Scott received a phone call from the Fox News channel Rita Cosby, asking if he had heard about a possible Lacey sighting in Washington state. Scott said he had, but didn't sound very optimistic about it. Excitingly, Cosby recited the details, explaining that the woman who appeared to be pregnant had come into a convenience store with no jacket on. When the clerk asked her why she wasn't wearing one, the woman allegedly told her she'd been kidnapped by a guy with a gun. The clerk did not call the police immediately. Police are now looking at the video, Cosby said. Definitely. When did she see them? Scott asked. Apparently last week. Wow. Okay. Do you know who is looking at it in the video? It's the local police there in Longview, Washington state. The call ended abruptly. A little while later, Scott's friend Heidi Fritz called about the same sighting. Scott confirmed what Cosby had said. Oh my God, that's great, Heidi exclaimed. Where is it? I don't know, Scott said flatly. He explained that he had called the Longview police and that they were getting the tapes together to view. Heidi asked Scott if he could drive up there. Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's not even close. I'll get up there. We're hoping it's her. Scott said he had phoned the Longview police and was waiting for a call back. Heidi said that she was so excited because Scott had said all along that he knew in his heart that Lacey was still alive, and now this woman, the clerk, was reporting that she saw her. For a moment, Scott didn't respond. Then he said that he was hopeful. We're praying it's her. Heidi's husband, Aaron, picked up the line and asked Scott how he was feeling. Scott hesitated and then remarked, I'm hopeful on this. I'm really feeling good right now. I just want to know. He promised to let the couple know as soon as he heard back from the Longview police. Hey, stop cutting your hands, all right, Aaron said. I'll try. The following morning, Scott's friend Mike Reed called about the incident in Washington. Scott told him that he had hoped it was true so that he'd know where to look. While the two were speaking, Scott's mother was leaving a message on Scott's voicemail, excitedly asking her son if he wanted to hop on a plane and go to Washington. She indicated that she was ready and mentioned a friend named Rachel who lived nearby so they would have a place to stay. Jackie said that she'd called the Modesto Police Department, but the chief was in a meeting. She choked up and began to cry, saying that she had hoped the sighting would come to something. Hanging up with Reed, Scott checked his voicemail. He laughed when he heard his mother describing Rachel's putting up flyers, and he did not return her call. It was another telling moment that would be played for the jury at the trial. About 30 minutes passed before Jackie called her son again and asked if he had heard about the Longview report. "Yeah," he said. "Is there any more news?" "According to today's paper, they are going to do a view of the video," Jackie replied. I asked, "Dad, are they capable of viewing the video?" "Yeah, I know. I want to see the damn thing. How can they ID her?" "Why don't you hop on a plane?" "Well, I'll definitely go, you know. I called up there and talked to one of them." "Oh, good for you." "Hopefully we'll see that God, at least that's a lead," Jackie said. "Yeah. I didn't take much credence in it until I heard the clerk was 45, and she is still a ditz if she didn't remember the incident earlier." "Yeah, when was last time she saw her?" Scott said, laughing. "The end of December, which is long enough time to get there, you know," Jackie said. "And then I hope that they have the video on the border," she asked, referring to the Canadian border. "Yeah, it's at the end of January." "Yeah, I know, sweetie." The report said that she waited a week or something, but now they're saying she waited a month. Chief said, "Yeah, it's a month." Jackie and Scott often called Lee Peterson Chief. "The woman only saw the pictures of Lacey on CNN recently," Jackie added. Scott sighed. Before he hung up, Scott asked about Mackenzie. "When I come down there, I'm going to give that dog a bath," he said. "The gardeners are afraid to come in," said Jackie, as Mackenzie barked in the backyard. Scott dialed the Longview Police Department, having told his mother and his friends he had already done so. "I think you are the police department that's looking at the tapes of her, Lacey, at the grocery store?" Scott told the officer who took the call. He asked to speak to a detective or whoever was helping in the investigation. There was no indication that Scott had ever spoken with the department before. "What's your name again?" the officer asked. "Scott Peterson." Scott was placed on hold. While he waited, a call was coming in to his line, and the call to Longview Police was lost. It was Scott's mom again. Scott's claimed that he had just spoken to the Longview Police again, and that they had 50 or 60 hours of tape to view. "They seem really nice up there," he said. "Well, you know, you're the only one who can truly identify her," Jackie said. "Yeah, I know. That's what I told him. That I would be up there in a minute if there was even a possibility." "Maybe she's in Canada now," Jackie said. "You might ask if the Canadians have tapes at their borders." "Yeah." Jackie said that she was going to ask Rachel to plaster the place with posters and suggested that Scott should give her a call. "Definitely," Scott replied. He mentioned that he intended to pick up some peanut butter slices for a dog. Jackie told him that he was welcome to come home any time. While Scott and his mother talked, Rita Cosby was leaving him a message saying that it was important to get the word of the sighting out to people. Scott deleted the call before it was finished. He was also had the message for his former employee, Eric Olson, and this call that he had returned. After some business talk, the conversation turned to the Washington sighting. Scott told Olson he intended to hang around the airport in case he had to go up there. Just before noon, Jackie phoned back to ask Scott where he was. He said that he was in San Juan Busta, not waiting at the airport as he had told Eric Olson. Jackie asked her son if he'd read the local paper. He said that he hadn't. Jackie then mentioned Mark Garagos, a high-priced lawyer, the one you pay a fortune to have him. She apparently seen Garagos quoted in an article in the local press, and his words were directed at Scott. He would tell you that you have been caught up in something larger than you ever thought of, and you have to weather the storm. Scott chuckled. "Having a fucking blast." "Cool, Scott." Scott's giggling. Scott chuckled. Jackie then admonished him not to talk to anyone. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, Jackie called her son once more. She had just heard on Abrams' report that Lacey wasn't the one on the video. She was sorry. Scott erased her call along with several others from the media, including one from the representative from Larry King Live. As January came to a close, investigators were focused on a single individual. This is an ongoing investigation with only one suspect at this time, that being Scott Peterson. They concluded in the ongoing report filed at the end of the month. By this point, Detective Grogan was in an odd and somewhat uncomfortable position. The Rocha family was asking him to act as the go-between in the battle between them and Scott. Sharon was worried that Scott was going to throw away or sell items of sentimental value to the family, and she implored him to contact Scott and ask him to return her daughter's belongings to her family. Grogan reported that Scott had already sold Lacey's Land Rover, but the news didn't upset her. Later, the dealer who purchased the car would return it to the family for the token sum of $1 to ensure that the donation could be listed as a gift on the family's tax returns. Sharon wanted personal items, things that had been directly linked to Lacey. She was unwilling to speak with Scott directly and wanted Grogan to mediate. It's very kind of those people to sell the car back to them for $1. "Hi, Scott, it's Craig Grogan," the detective said on the phone message he left on January 31st. "I'm calling at the request of the Rocha family. Sharon would like to see if you have any photographs of Lacey when she was a child or photos of her that you would part with. She's asking something about some Tiffany lamps, which apparently were Lacey's grandmother's. I'm just asking for them because we're not trying to make you do anything, but if you'd be willing to do that, I would be willing to be an intermediary for you guys." Sharon had also asked for some other items from the nursery. As the detective prepared to leave the office that day, he was told that Amber and Scott were speaking on the phone. Scott was telling Amber to let her know that he had scheduled a polygraph exam. He had wanted her to meet him at the polygraph's office at 11 o'clock the following morning. Replaying Scott's calls, Grogan learned that Scott had actually made the appointment for 9 o'clock. Yet Amber believed that she was going to accompany Scott to the test and called the police to ask if the undercover officer would escort her there. The police instructed Amber not to meet him at the office. No undercover operation was planned. In the follow-up call, Scott asked Amber if she believed their relationship would continue. He saw no reason to take the polygraph if she saw no possibility of the two of them going forward together. He explained that he was taking a risk by agreeing to the test because if the media learned of his intent to take one, it would be bad. The two got into an argument about when Amber asked Scott to use her name during an examination. He insisted on replacing it with another name. He was worried that the polygrapher would go to the media with the results to the test if he realized who the client was. Scott next advised Amber to take precautions so that she wasn't followed to the office the next day. He also told her that he had been thinking about her and that he was nervous about their meeting. The following morning, February 1st, just before 9 o'clock, Scott dialed Amber and asked her to meet him in 30 minutes. "Are you kidding?" Amber asked. "It's real close to you," Scott told her. Amber asked if Scott was now contacting the polygrapher. He said yes, and then gave her directions to Expert Polygraph Services on the corner of Palm and Browning Streets, and told her that the examiner would meet them in the lobby. When Scott declined to reveal the polygrapher's name, the two started arguing again. "I will be waiting there at 9:30. I hope to see you there," he told her. It's unclear whether Detective Brocchini acted on his own when he decided to stake out the location that morning. What is clear is that he parked a discreet distance away from the polygrapher's office in a school parking lot about 200 yards away. He was hiding among 8 other cars. Yet just after 9:30, Scott came up to his unmarked car and startled him. While watching the intersection, I saw someone walking up towards the back of my vehicle, Brocchini wrote in a report. I looked in my mirror and noticed it was Scott Peterson. Peterson was wearing blue sweatpants and a blue sweatshirt, and he was holding a spiral notebook. I immediately exited my vehicle and walked towards Peterson. I wanted to thank you for going to America's Most Wanted and answering the phones, Scott said. Brocchini thought it was odd that Scott didn't ask if he had found what he had found out about how... Brocchini thought it was odd that Scott did not ask how he found out about the test. It's too bad you want to take the polygraph in private, the detective replied. Scott told him that it was not appropriate for him to take one with the police, and then turned and walked away. He entered the office complex and then emerged 10 minutes later. As he was walking back towards his truck, Brocchini drove over to him and parked behind his vehicle. "Scott," the detective yelled, "is it true that Kirk McAllister fired you as a client?" "That's new to me." Brocchini told him that Gloria Gomez, a local reporter, had reported from outside McAllister's office last night that he had been fired. "You mean the news reported it?" Scott replied. "Yes." Scott was silent. Brocchini told Scott that he had a lot of explaining to do. "You don't know, I just stop on the side of the road and break down for no apparent reason," Scott said. "I really do miss Lacey." Brocchini told Scott that he did not act like somebody who misses his pregnant wife. As Scott walked away, he yelled after him and he had some explaining to do about the other girlfriends I identified. "Right. Other girlfriends," Scott mumbled. Brocchini said that he had a photo of Scott with another woman, but Scott ignored the statement. Instead, he climbed into his truck and got on his cell phone. According to Brocchini, Scott remained calm and emotionless throughout the confrontation. As he pulled out of the parking lot, Scott was dialing Amber Frey's number, ready to accuse her of telling the police about the polygraph. Amber didn't pick up the phone, but a few minutes later, she called him back. When he told her he'd found Detective Brocchini in the parking lot, she was nonplussed. "What are you talking about?" she asked. Scott said he was heartbroken. He had totally trusted her, but now she couldn't be trusted. He'd given her the name and the place, and Brocchini had showed up. "What does that say?" he demanded. Amber insisted she hadn't spoken to Brocchini in weeks. "Well, then how did he end up there?" Scott broke down in tears. Amber said she had nothing to do with it. Scott admitted that he had done a terrible thing by lying to her, and now he knew how it must have felt. All right. Amber asked Scott if he intended to follow through with the test. Scott said he'd take one as long as she met him there, and insisted that he had taken a big risk in going to the polygrapher's office. Amber said that she would feel the safest with Scott taking the polygraph at the police department. "It's not an option," he told her. "What did you tell the polygrapher?" Scott said he paid him $300 and explained the situation. "Can I call him?" Scott gave her Melvin King's telephone number. As the two argued, Jackie Peterson was anxiously leaving a message asking Scott if Kirk McAllister had really dropped him as a client. A short time after the parking lot encounter, Detective Brocchini arrived at Amber's home to find her in her pajamas chatting on the phone with him. Once the two hung up, he discouraged her from having any further contact with Scott, explaining that it could be detrimental to the case. Amber handed over more audio tapes to Brocchini, along with the recording of their conversation just after Scott discovered Brocchini in the parking lot. Brocchini reported that the tape had captured Scott acting like he was crying. Peterson encouraged Amber to meet him anywhere, anytime, in any public place, as long as the police were not involved. Fry asked Peterson why he did not want to be with the law enforcement, and Peterson said law enforcement had systematically lied to his family and Lacey's family, and they were trying to say he was involved in the case. Later that day, without immediately identifying himself as a police officer, Brocchini contacted Melvin King. Through a series of questions, he learned that the polygrapher that the polygraphs King performs are completely confidential. When I asked if he was served with an FBI subpoena, would he turn over the polygraphs, King said that there was no requirement for him to keep records, and it's not unusual for his polygraph records to be destroyed, Brocchini wrote. King's answers indicated he was willing to work with some regarding a confidential polygraph. Once Brocchini identified himself as a police officer, King revealed that he was a retired lieutenant for the Fresno Police Department. A 30-year law enforcement veteran, King had been conducting polygraphs for 28 years. In response to questions, King said that he didn't know the identity of the man who had scheduled to take a polygraph that morning, and that the man had canceled the exam after his girlfriend refused to go with him. King said that Scott had been told that he needed to bring someone with him to the polygraph, and that otherwise the test would be of little value, as the results had to matter to someone in order to add pressure to the exam. King also said that he'd received 2 phone calls from a woman asking whether the person who had an appointment that morning had completed the test. Citing confidentiality, King had declined to answer her questions. This contradicts the account Amber recalls in her recent book. According to her, she asked King, "Is Scott Peterson scheduled to come in for a polygraph?" King answered yes. He said that he was just waiting to hear from the person who would be coming with him. In any event, King told Brocchini that he would not polygraph Scott Peterson. He later advised Scott to take the test with the law enforcement. He told Scott how Congressman Gary Condit had taken a private polygraph test after the disappearance of Chandra Levy in 2001, and how useless the test had been in proving his innocence. Peterson never told King why he didn't want to take the police polygraph, Brocchini wrote. Oh my gosh. That was a really long chapter, guys. So we're in the Bellingham makerspace. I want to show you guys real quick. It's real fancy. So this is a 3D printing station. So they have every other craft center you can imagine. So you got your arts, you got your sewing. Showing off your makerspace.
Hey, what's up?
So we got our laser cutters over here. The store is making me really sad. Wanted to show off the makerspace. So you got your metal shop, your wood shop. How awesome is that? Okay, bye.